Hey, welcome back to the EduTech Guys. We're at ISTE 2022.
Yeah.
It's back live, and we're really excited to have our next guest in the seat this morning, and we're going to let him tell us who he is, where he's from, what he does, and all that kind of good stuff. So here we go.
Well, guys, thanks very much, first and foremost, for having me on the show. My name's Ed Morgan from DisplayNote, and DisplayNote, a software company that create simple screen sharing solutions for educators. So usually taking what's on a device and getting it up to a big screen, or taking what's on that big screen and getting it out to lots of devices. So our job is to just do the thing and get out of the way and let the magic happen.
So talk about that specifically. How does that software work? I don't mean, behind the scenes company secrets, but you know what I mean. If I'm a classroom teacher, then what does that software look like from my end? And then the extension of that would be maybe from the IT side. What does it take to implement this?
Sure, no worries. Well, the first question would be, from a teacher side, usually what they would see when they open up the application, it's either Windows or an Android application, and it does come pre-packaged on a lot of kind of big brand displays out there, but they would really see, here is a 6-digit session ID and a URL to follow, and for anyone that wants to get what's on that device up to the front, it's go to that URL, put in the session ID, and that's it.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, and that's it. And unless the teacher said, I'm going to just turn on moderator mode, so then they would control who gets to share or not. And in terms of an IT department, usually it's either a Windows application or it's actually preloaded on displays. And client devices are everything from apps, was Windows, Mac, iOS, which would need installed or pushed out over the network, or it's just a no app approach via the URL, or kind of Miracast, AirPlay, Google Cast. So we did a survey recently, or actually looked at data from probably the last 2 million screen shares over the last few months, and we found out that about 60% of our users are just going through the browser.
Yeah.
For, well, you don't need to tell you, no updates to manage, nothing to deploy. Everyone's pretty au fait with entering a URL. Certainly students are anyway, and anyone is. So it's the most popular approach.
What's really cool about that is that means the students could be anywhere.
The students can be anywhere,
anywhere in the world.
Yeah,
they can pull it up.
Absolutely. Now we don't support video and voice. Well, our job is, our sweet spot is in the classroom or in the room, but it absolutely uses the same methodology of it could be anywhere, and for good reason. Once you start getting into the native casting of AirPlay and Google Cast, there's a lot of network dependencies, and the last thing a teacher needs to be doing is thinking about networks. They're part instructor, part therapist, part priest. So it's like we want to use the internet to make sure that the connection always happens, so that they don't have to think about that. So it'll hit a server, and it'll pop up on the screen.
Yeah.
They don't need to care, really.
Right, exactly. Well, one of the things that I like is the ability to either have the students share their content out, or if the teacher needs the content shared to the students, so that every student is on the same page and they're not all willy-nilly walking all over the place. Yeah, that you can do that
absolutely.
as well.
And there's a couple of benefits. That one, everyone's on the same page. There's a kind of everyone has the context of what's being shown, but there's also a lot of impairments in the room, some kind of physical impairments, like just room layout. So if I'm like facing you guys now and the board's over here, I've got an impairment, or structure of the classroom, or maybe a physical impairment. And when you start to show things like code reviews or equations or languages, seeing that 30 foot away, we're designing for a 30-foot experience, is really difficult. So our job is to get it onto that personal device so that the student can see what the teacher wants them to see in the same format.
Yeah. Well, I can see this. So in public schools now, in schools, the big deal now is helping our teachers, training our teachers. And I can tell you, as a bifocal wearer, I can't see that far. And so when you get 50 teachers in a classroom, this would work out great for PD, because now I've got it right in front of me. I can understand it better, because a lot of students and teachers tune out the moment they can't see. That's a big deal.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the cognitive load of having to strain and do that first before you then get on to, well, what does this all mean? Is really tough. So again, our job is to get it to here and get out of the way. So you're absolutely right.
I think the really cool thing here is, this is for the techie nerds, the IT folks listening to this one, is compression has gotten to such a neat you guys are doing so many amazing things across the web that we couldn't do.
Unbelievable.
Even 2 years ago.
Well, we did our first ISTE 10 years ago. We started with a solution called DisplayNote Classroom, our very first product. And we had this idea of coming from an EdTech background, getting what's on the display out to these newfangled devices called iPads. I don't know whatever happened to them.
I don't know, whatever happened on iPad.
And the thing that we found was exactly what you said, Jeff, compression and just actual network infrastructure support. So imagine back 10, 11 years ago trying to stream to 30 devices worked really well when you're showing it for the first time, but we found when you got out into the field, like, we don't have the network for that.
Yeah.
And to get around to your point, over the last 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, things that compression in web and the advances in WebRTC, which is a protocol that we use, is just, it's crazy. And we see the future of screen sharing. It's going to be primarily, it's going to be all web in and web out. So
yeah. So that's a great question. The audio and the video part of it. I mean, you guys ever gonna, do you see a need to add that to your product?
Yes and no. The no would probably be to do it ourselves, because there are, as you know, many great video providers who are knocking out video at a cost that's just you couldn't actually compete.
Right.
But that said, there's lots of great tools that we could work with and should work alongside the Zooms and the Teams and of the world. So yeah, I definitely see that being somewhere where we could go.
Yeah, I can see this being used in a lot of classrooms. So let's talk about the teacher usage. So the educators that were listening to this, they're going to ask, okay, so when I open it up, how hard is it? I know here's the URL, but there's got to be some other little caveats to it. What is it like for a teacher to onboard that?
Great question. On the face of it, it is pretty simple. It's go to the URL and enter the session ID. They really need to hit a button to get the session to start. And we speaking to our teachers, they can find the kids, just see the session ID and they're in no time. Now, what has to happen, I think, before that point is that there has to be some kind of ramp up or runway into when does it make sense to share your screen? At what points in that lesson do I want them to share their screen? Do I want the kids to just share the screen whenever they want, or are they waiting some sort of verbal cue? So there's a lot of work done by good instructional technologists beforehand to talk to the teachers and find out what do they want from the classroom and to help educate them on this is the software. More importantly, how does it fit in with the routine? How do you get this app out to kids' devices? And what lessons, what kind of instruction works well with screen sharing, which is really, screen sharing is making thinking visible. When does it make sense to do that? So the nuts and bolts of starting it is pretty easy. It needs some thought as to when it makes sense, not just hit it and go whenever you want.
So some of the things that you've been talking about on the student side are kind of those interactive moments where if you've got a student who wants to or who needs to demonstrate that they know how to solve this formula or put this formula, is that part of your software, like almost like a whiteboarding, or is that like something else is being shared through your software?
It's part of our software. So to answer your question, I think what you're referring to is, some students' work is being used, or a student is being used as an exemplar. So I want to take what's on that student's screen, make that thinking visible, and get that up onto the display that others can go and see, as well as it's impossible for me to see what's on their device if it's turned around. So we make that thinking visible, but we also do is allow other streams to join them at the same time, so you can view 2, 3, or 4. So when I imagine between the group of us, if you ask the same question or a problem, we would all come at it from a different angle. Absolutely. So there's many ways to skin a cat, as they say. I think that might be an Irish phrase, I don't know.
No, they say that here.
Oh, okay, fair enough. So we're finding a lot of teachers are using that functionality to get multiple screens on display so that you can take a look at an exemplar, or you can share and compare and just look at different approaches, and then if you want to annotate and whiteboard over it or capture that moment and share it out to devices, you can.
So the whiteboarding piece, the students could also whiteboard as well, or that's just the instructor side that can whiteboard and share that back out?
There's a dedicated whiteboard for the instructor, but there is two-way annotation for some of the devices
Wow,
as well.
that's really
So-
cool.
Man, yeah, that's rad.
So you made me forget what I was going to ask.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It'll come to me here in a second. But one of the things I wanted to say is that this sounds like an easy rollout for IT department because it can be done in Google Admin for Chromebooks. It can be done in, say, Mosel or Jamf for one of those things for Apple. So the ease of getting it out is super, super easy.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. So I love this idea because what this creates is a new PD piece for teaching teachers because it opens up, just like you said, all four of us might have different ideas about how to use it. That's really going to open up how we're teaching in a classroom because now this is a new opportunity to teach in a different way.
Absolutely, and we also found a use case. When you put a product out in the world, like anything sort of creative, you don't know how it's going to be used or perceived. So, one thing that we found out was some teachers were sharing what was on their panel, their interactive touchscreen out to students, but they'd also found that sub-teachers, teaching assistants were actually following along in a different room, so they could go, this is what's happening on that board. This is what's happening in that room without me having to be here, so I can watch the teacher's lesson, what's happening on screen, but I don't have to be in the lesson. That will help me then kind of transition nicely into that class if I'm going to be taking over or substituting for that teacher.
Yeah. I can see this usage in school board meetings. I can see it in business. I mean, it's just, you guys have got to be just dropping it everywhere at this point.
Well, we're trying our best. In fact, I think we're now becoming the market leader for wireless sharing via interactive panels. So we work with a lot of the manufacturers out there, and that's helping us getting out into the many classrooms of the world.
Well, and I think that is such a key piece of this is that your focus mostly on the software behind DisplayNote versus building your own devices that run DisplayNote. Those partnerships, like you're talking about, various interactive displays where you're getting those folks to have your piece on their board. So now when a district, if they standardize on a particular display panel,
absolutely,
you're already in their system. All they got to do is get with you to turn it on and work out the licensing and go boom, there it is, and they don't have to buy anything else, hardware wise especially. But and for the most part, other than getting into learning exactly how to use DisplayNote, which to me so far sounds like it's pretty straightforward and simple. There's the learning curve for that is almost flat. I mean, there's almost no learning curve. So they learn the panel, they're sharing. In some cases, they already know how to share, say their iPad up to their display now. They're incorporating DisplayNotes on it.
Absolutely. And
that is awesome.
That's a big benefit of, I guess, when it is on panels and a district is standardizing on the panels. The PD for that as well it's all coming from one company, and the same apps right across the board, so it's not I have to learn this for this room and that for that room. So that's definitely something that we're finding.
That's a very smart approach to getting your stuff out there into a lot of places, especially if they're looking for new installations of panels. But even if they've got older equipment, it's still going to tie in to
perfectly
what they're already using. Just display using DisplayNote.
That's right.
So if our listeners want to reach out to you or find out more, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, I would encourage, as much as I'd want users to reach out to me personally, I think that we'd be better served. I think if they've got problems in terms of how do I become smarter, how to make my classrooms more flexible, how do I know when's a good time to screen share or not, you'd be best placed to go to DisplayNote.com and have a look at the solutions and let them do the talking for themselves.
I don't know. You're very passionate about this, and it
do you
shows.
think?
Yeah.
I think blood, sweat, and tears over the last 10 years, and I think when you speak to teachers and realize that how important it is to them, a tool like this, when they turn up for the lesson and they've got 30 kids and they've got the lesson planned out and screen sharing doesn't work, that's a real killer. It's like, okay, now I have to totally think about something in a different way. That's not going to work. So that passion, I guess, just comes from knowing how important it is to instructors, to teachers, and obviously, most importantly, to the students out there. So
yeah, that's why these events are important, because when we meet developers like you and that are passionate about us teaching kids, that's the key.
Yeah, I think
that's why you wake up every day and do it for 10 years.
I don't sleep.
That's why you don't sleep for 10 years.
Yep, you're one of those folks. You're up all night coding.
Yeah, I wish I could code. I'm not. Certainly, was part of one of the early members of DisplayNote. A lot of us have come from an EdTech background, actually, and building. We were always building. DisplayNote came about because we were building EdTech software for interactive whiteboards at the time, and it's like, this is interactive for one person only. For the person at the front, there's no interactivity for students. There's no way of, like, these great devices that are coming in. Districts are spending good money on devices, and we want them to get the best out of that investment. So that's really where we got our start. And so I'm not a coder, but come from a point of, look, this definitely can be better.
You're a problem solver. That's what we call
it. Let's agree to that.
You're a problem solver. Yeah. Hey, Ed, thanks for coming on the show,
Jeff,
man.
Thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate your time.
Have a great ISTE.
Yep, thank you.